help with tax, don't know what to do. The Brysons are here for you. We know every tip and trick. It's serious tax talk with a Louisiana twist.
Well, hello there. It is great to see you again, and welcome back to another installment of Talkin Tax. I am your host and moderator, Ryan Ruff. We've got the stars of the show in Mr. Cary and Miss Angie Bryson of the Bryson Law Firm joining us momentarily for another tax law-related discussion. That's what we do here on the show. And hey, look, if you are coming aboard, you're joining us right now here on the Facebook live stream. We appreciate you being here. Big reason why we're doing it live here on Facebook is to, obviously get you some of your feedback from, our viewership. So if you've got a question or a comment about anything that we're diving into today, please throw it down in the comment box below. We'll take some time to address those questions and comments throughout today's show and make sure we get any of your thoughts answered. If you're checking us out maybe after the fact on a podcasting platform, all the same, appreciate you being here with us today for the conversation. If you ever want to be, attuned to when we're doing these on Facebook Live, you can always head over to the Bryson Law Firm Facebook page for updates on when our next live stream might be. Today, we're going to be diving into the tax resolution process. This is really the heart of what the Brysons do day in and day out. If you maybe missed the last few episodes, we've been building towards this moment. We've been talking about their discovery process, really what kicks everything off. Then, of course, the monitoring and compliance of going through and getting us to the point where we can finally face the IRS and get our tax issue resolved. Today, we are talking about just that, the resolution of your tax-related issue. So without further ado, let's go ahead and bring the Brysons on and get today's conversation rolling. Cary and Angie, good to see you. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good morning.
I am doing just fine. I'm excited to be here with you guys today. We are getting into the heart of what you guys do. But hey, for our audience members, maybe those who didn't check us out or just weren't able to catch our prior episodes where we took that deep dive into what your discovery process looks like, and then we moved into that second phase of monitoring and compliance. Maybe we have you guys start there today. Could you give us a little high-level overview to bring our audience up to speed about what those two parts of this process look like? I'll kick it over to you guys.
Yeah.
Well, okay. In the first part of the case, the discovery phase, that's kind of, as to keep it simple, that's the engagement, onboarding of the file. We've done the transcript. We've gotten the records from the IRS. We have, gotten all the financial records from the client. So, man, we've dug into the client's financials. We know them probably better than they know themselves. And we know what the IRS knows about them as well at this point, So we've kind of got our idea of what we want to do with this. The second part was, as we talked about, was the most important, very important part, is to get current and compliant. Because we can't do anything if they're not filing and they're not in some kind of system of paying, because we've got to make these problems old problems, not ongoing problems. Okay, so we've got the client figured out, we've got the IRS figured out. Now we've got the client in a posture to get their case done. So now it's to the, like you said, this is really the heart of what we do. It's time to basically, for lack of a better word to put it, it's time to tee it up with the IRS. So that's what we're getting ready to do here.
I love it. And guys, I know that, it's such a big part of what you do. I mean, hey, when your clients come to you for help, this is the moment that everybody looks forward to, of course, getting their tax-related issue taken care of. We're talking about you guys going toe-to-toe with the IRS, what this process looks like. Take me through, where do we begin? I would imagine it's probably some sort of submission, some sort of outreach to the IRS to get this process in motion to be resolved. Talk to me about where we begin with the actual resolution of a tax-related issue.
Well, we have to review the financials first, and that was part of the compliance and monitoring component. So once we identify the options that are available to our clients, we will start putting the pieces together, assembling documents, putting the forms together, and rolling that out to the client. I mean, there are so many. Cary and I talked about it this morning. There are so many options in the IRS world. I mean, like if this page has 10 things on it, and so one of the things that I think we're best at is taking a holistic approach towards resolving the tax issues. By that I mean, there is no cookie cutter solution for what could be a good solution for me may not be a good one for Ryan. So it's very important that you get good advice with regard to what your options are And, we may put together an installment agreement if you're a payment plan. We may say, hey, look, why don't we voluntarily pay towards these tax periods for a while and let some statutes run and those expire on some of the other periods. And there's just a lot of strategy there. So, to give you a blanket answer is hard, but at the same time, it is the same process. So we'll look at those financials, visit with a client, confirm everything is correct, lay out all the different options and scenarios and what the risks and benefits are, and then let them choose. What's your tolerance level? How long can you stand to wait? Are you okay with monitoring for several months and then submitting a formal plan? But then there's also, that everything's an offer in compromise. So we'll file those documents to make a settlement offer. That's really it, kind of in a nutshell. Lots of questions that go with
Well,
that.
I mean, I would add to, to this, each one of the different options has different bureaucratic red tape that you got to go through. They got certain form. You got to use a certain form for the offer. You got to use a certain form for the installment agreement. You got to do this. Even a full pay, which sounds so simple. You're going to write a check, but you know what? To write a check and get it into the IRS and get it credited appropriately and get the lien removed requires a certain form and certain process and certain procedures to go through to make sure it all happens that way. So and the problem is not the problem, the good thing to have, but what I think what Angie was alluding to is that, not every client is going to say, okay, we're doing a installment agreement. Well, we're going to do an installment agreement, but we also going to do a penalty abatement. We're also going to do, this evaluation. So there's other things that we've been doing. Not one thing applies. Usually more than one thing applies. So we're doing a bunch of different things. And what I tell people, and what I guess will be good for this podcast, because a lot of these people, are going to try this themselves. And the biggest mistake that I see from people when they try to do it themselves is the lack of understanding of following the bureaucratic process. Because if you don't follow it, guess what? The IRS is going to kick it out. They send it right back. They love that, and that's what happens.
Well, even if you do follow it, they'll
still try to kick it out, and you got when you did right. You're good point. You're right. So they'll do that. So it's a process, but I tell people all the time, the problem is a lack of proof. Like somebody qualifies for a penalty abatement because they had this great loss. They had a death in their family, a hurricane or something like that. But so they just allege it. Oh, well, the hurricane came through and I didn't do, or my spouse lost his job but they don't take the extra step to prove that their spouse lost a job or that they were in the hospital for 4 months and get the medical records. It's the lack of proof and the understanding of how to prove an argument, is kind of the biggest issue that I see, for people that really try to do it themselves. And of course, if we're going to do it, we're going to prove the case. So
we've spent 30 plus years proving proving cases. So it's
and that's why it takes us that extra effort to get it, because, our submissions, when they go to the IRS, I love them because they're thick and they're meaty and, and I know the bureaucrat looking at it is not wanting to go through all that anyway. So I get some joy out of that just myself. But anyway, so that would be, I'd say, the process of getting it all together, getting the plan and knowing how to implement each element of the plan to the fullest, and which is in the best interest of the client.
Guys, I love that. And, for our audience, we spent a whole episode really diving into the various options that are available for tax relief. I mean, you guys mentioned a few there: offer and compromise, installment agreements, currently non-collectible being one. I mean, there's a laundry list of different options that are available. Obviously, you had just mentioned that it all pertains to, your specific option will pertain to your obvious, your tax related issue. But here we are. We've, you go through the submission of that resolution request, that thick stack of paper you just mentioned, Cary. Okay, they've digested that information. I'm sure they come back with some thoughts of their own. What does this negotiation, communication process look like as you're trying to reach that true solution for the client? How does that play out, and what's the client's involvement in that? Are they just kind of sitting back in their seat, letting you guys do the work? What's that look like?
We never, not say never, we very rarely have our clients speak with the IRS. Of course, the IRS is able to demand that they speak with them, but very rarely do they request that. So, we insulate. One of our jobs is to protect our clients from the IRS, right? So, we insulate our clients, and we handle most of our work is done by phone. Some of it is done in person, but the IRS is pretty much a phone world right now. Even with a case that has a specific revenue officer or a specific person assigned towards resolution. Negotiation looks like, everything you can imagine: phone calls, letters, faxes. For me, I'm very particular about documenting everything that I do, or every conversation. We all are, with the IRS, and so that's important because, as I said previously, really joking, but seriously, they'll kick things back that are perfect and say that we missed XYZ when I'm looking at my package and I know I submitted XYZ 3 times. So, in terms of what that looks like negotiation wise, it's lots of phone calls, lots of letters, documenting conversations, and recording our efforts on paper, essentially over and over and over again. And then we have to appeal.
Yeah.
I mean,
and it's also too, like in the phone calls. I mean, how many times have we had a phone call and, the IRS personnel would say, "Oh, that's not allowed." And you're like, "Yeah, it is allowed.
Sure.
Look here, and you gotta, it's just like a negotiation. Well, yeah, it is. Usually you got to cite their manual to them. Here's your revenue manual. You got to look here, and they're like, "Oh,
Wow."
okay." Because, the training it depends on where you are in the case, and what type of case you have. Because there are some cases that are handled by high level people that, even attorneys in some situations that we deal with. And
those are actually more pleasant.
Those are actually, they're sometimes easier because it's more cut and dry, really. But sometimes with the IRS, depending on the level and experience of the person, and frankly, even some of the experienced ones, I think are just, having a bad day. Let's just leave it at that. They're having a bad day and they don't want to do anything. And you have to, you have to be ready. You have to be on your P's and Q's and know what's allowed, what's not allowed. Now, obviously, we know, but just because something's not allowed doesn't mean I'm not going to try to get it through.
Sure.
Of course, I'm going to try to, if they miss it, they miss it. If they don't, they do the same to us. If you don't know your file and don't know your stuff, they definitely will get you into a bad deal. And that's what I see with people a lot of times. They think the IRS is the judge, and they're not the judge. They're not the final say. So they'll just agree to something that they really shouldn't be agreeing to, something they can't afford or something they just agree to because they think that's it. Well, it's not it. And like Angie said, there's always appeals. There's always other areas you can go to. There's things you can do. And a lot of times, how many times have we had to, in negotiations where you just kind of you reach an impasse with somebody because they're not understanding your argument. So you could just simply say, "Well, let me speak to your supervisor." I'm sorry, let me go up. And a lot of times I've had to go to the supervisor and
the supervisor.
And I go, "Hey, well, let me speak to your regional manager." And we go up and, we've had cases where we go all the way back to Washington, D.C. if we have to. Well, you got to go all the way up because they're just not understanding and they're not wanting to agree. So that's kind of, to know those things and know what goes up. So it's not the unfortunate part of it that I find is that it can be a very slow and tedious process because when I ask to speak to the manager, it's not like the manager's sitting right there waiting to pick the phone call up. It's, because I know I have a right to speak to that manager, but I got a right within 48 hours to speak to that manager. Well, then we hang up, the request goes to the manager. Well, guess what? The manager don't call you back in 48 hours. So then you got to call, then you got to start this, then you go. So it's just things take time. And that's the most frustrating part, I think, for clients.
Persistence.
They don't understand that it just takes time. I mean, I'm sure you've heard it's all over the paper today. The IRS is 6 months behind in opening mail.
Right.
6 months behind in opening mail. I mean, they've got stuff sitting in envelopes just sitting in trucks out in the parking lot. I mean, it's, and those are checks out there. There's tax returns out there. There's correspondence from us out there saying, we want to file for this penalty, whatever. They're just sitting there.
Wow. Well, Cary, I'm glad you brought up that idea of just a slow timeline because I know we've touched on this in past episodes, but I feel like it's worth clarifying again for our audience is during this process of negotiation, right? And that timeline's getting stretched out. Your client's thinking, okay, I've done my part. I sought help with the Brysons. We've got this in motion. Maybe they've had penalties that have been tacked on during the process of them not filing or whatever their circumstances is. Once those negotiation efforts are taking place and a true resolution request has been submitted, we're now in it, just for a point of clarification for our audience, can those penalties continue to be tacked on during that? So basically from the client standpoint, is this elongated time that it's taking to get this resolution, is it costing them money, or is this something that can all just still be disputed or resolved on the back end when the time comes? Just a point of clarification here.
That's a really great question. So one of the big analysis that happens internally for us when we're evaluating options is to forward think, to anticipate what is the most beneficial for the client. So for example, if Ryan is going to be a payment plan, and I know that very early in the process, I may not want to request a formal payment plan today. Because of other issues. However, I'm going to have a conversation with you and say, look, Ryan, you really need to start living like you're in this payment plan today, because if you don't, and the end game 18 months from now is a payment plan, then you're going to look at me and say, why didn't we do this 18 months ago and save me interest? And I could have whittled down my balances 18 months ago. So we're going to have a real conversation practically about how to save you money by forward thinking. So if that's why it's important for us to look at the whole picture early on with your financial snapshot and understand the direction we're going in. Are we going to go north? Are we going to go south? If you're an offer and we feel like you're a really good offer and we have the conversation, it doesn't matter how much you owe. If the offer is accepted and you've accrued another $25,000 in penalties 18 months later, the offer is the offer, and that's a static number. So I'll tell you that, and the risk is that it gets denied, and that you do have those penalties there, and the analysis happens early on in our relationship. So it's a great question, but it's important to forward think.
The point is that your question should be analyzed in every case, in every situation, because yes, you are, and that's one of my most frustrating experiences in this practice is knowing that there's scammers out there that advertise, and they do that, and all they do is they get the clients, they get them. I dealt with one yesterday. I had a client, and he had 5 years ago, he hired one of these scam companies out there, paid him a bunch of money. They filed an offer in compromise and completely wrecked his case. They've extended the statute. We talked about that in an earlier podcast. One of the worst things you can do is file an offer in compromise if it's junk, and there's so much junk that gets out there, and because it extends the statute of limitations, it increases the penalties and interest, just like Angie was just talking about. So right. It's really a bad thing to do in your case. Happens all the time because people, those offers are really hard to get, and they take an extremely long time. I mean, we're talking 18 months from filing to getting this thing resolved. That's a long time.
Yeah, absolutely.
You got to understand. Yeah, it's a great deal when you settle your case for pennies on the dollar, but you better understand that, and have a really, really good shot of settling that case.
It's not automatic.
Yeah. It's
not a fill out a form and have it done.
Yeah. Right. And the reason it takes so long is because they scrutinize those. They're not just routinely granted. It's heavily scrutinized, goes to special units that look at everything and are looking for reasons to deny it.
Sure. And Cary, one thing I also want to circle back to, and this is something I feel like that we've briefly touched on in a past episode, is this idea of, would you agree with this statement of you kind of have one shot with the IRS, and if you miss, it can create more problems for you down the road. So when that time comes for a submission of the resolution request, for you guys to go ahead and put your plan forth based on whichever solution you believe is pertinent for that given client, As if a client was going to take this by storm themselves and not utilize a service, like the Bryson law firm. If they were to take this on, maybe throw out an installment, or an offer, or maybe look to try and get some penalties abated. Would you agree with the just kind of the phrase, really, the idea of you kind of have one shot, otherwise it can create more problems for you? What are your thoughts on this? And because I'm sure there's somebody out there in the audience that maybe has tried once before, had some issues, and maybe now they're like, am I too deep in the hole at this point? Just kind of clue me in on this.
Well, I mean, I'll answer, as an attorney, I'm not going to give you the absolute. No
Sure.
way to ever say yes to that question. But I would say that in most cases, yes, I do like to put the best foot forward when I'm coming to resolve a case. But I'm going to I'm going to take my best shot, and we're going to try to get it resolved. But there are situations, and I can think of several that sometimes you don't want your best foot forward. There's some reasons, and valid reasons, and very good reasons, and very good strategy to maybe not do the best shot in the beginning, maybe try to do something else, or maybe you're trying to accomplish something that's because, only the clients know, and we know that in 2 years, the client may stand to inherit a bunch of money, just say that. And things are going to be completely different in a couple of years. So I don't want to wait a couple of years and resolve this. I want to kind of, in that if I do something that's going to take a long time to resolve, I may not want to do that because then the light's going to be shined on them in 2 years. I want to shine the light now. So it's just strategy. I mean, and that's what Angie was talking about at the very beginning. I mean, each case is so different and really have to understand all the different angles of approach. But generally speaking, I'll never give you that absolute. Generally speaking, I would say yes. I do. We usually are going to take the best shot from the get-go.
But I will say
Good to
though,
know.
yeah, oh yeah, always. I mean, but if someone has tried to solve their tax problem, I'm not sure. I hope I'm answering your question, but if someone has tried previously to solve their tax problem, like this particular client who actually hired someone to help, who clearly, maybe didn't do a great job, or you've called and, you've not knowingly or unwittingly put yourself into a payment plan that you can't afford. It doesn't mean that you can't explore all of these options again with the IRS. It's better if you do it right the first time, obviously, because it'll cause you a lot less pain and sorrow and interest, maybe, and some other things. But we start fresh. When clients come to us, we're looking at it like a blank slate. I mean, clearly we have to deal with history, if there was a prior payment plan and all those issues, but it's not like these options are still not available to most clients. So I hope.
Good point. They're not mutually exclusive.
Yeah. Right. And there is a misconception about that. I've had a payment plan in the past and now I'll never get another one. I mean, the IRS wants, let's face it, they want to be paid, and if they're not going to be paid, then they want to know that there's closure with an offer or some other option like bankruptcy or something like that. They want it done. So those things are always open, essentially.
Yeah. Good to know. Good to know. Well, guys, as we're kind of bringing the tax resolution process to a head here, one thing I did want to touch on is there's this idea of ancillary items. Clue me in on what is this? What are we talking about? Where do they apply? Give us kind of a little bit of an overview on this and just how they come into play as we're moving through tax resolution as a whole.
Dude,
you can.
I'll start, and I'm sure Angie will have to clean it up. But so what that to me means, and I think what we're trying to convey, and where we see a lot. Let's say we do get the offer in compromise accepted. Okay. Well, it doesn't just the case. People think, well, okay, great, but most offers in compromise require payments over 5 months, or some payments over 24 months. Well, then there's still a process, and those have to be paid on time. Did the deal? Well, like I said, well, if you just mail in that check, well, it's sitting in the 18-wheeler in the parking lot, and they didn't open it on time. Well, guess what happens if you send it in here, if they don't, the offer automatically defaults. Like people don't realize that. Just for instance, with an offer, one of the things an offer you basically put on probation after they're granted. You have to file on time, pay on time for 5 years after that. If you don't, it's automatically rejected. Everything goes right back into collections. They just like it never happened. And clients need to realize that these things don't just end that thing. Another thing I alluded to early, clients walk in all the time. I want that lien off. I'm ready to write a check. What do I need to do? You can't just mail in a check. You'll never, the lien, you mail in a check, they'll take the money, usually but then they got to get the lien off. That's a whole nother process, whole nother department, whole nother thing to get the lien off. Now there are ways to go in and you kind of go to the office and you get the lien release and you give them the check kind of tit for tat type deal. And, but those are the things that you got to know how to do. So there's a lot of closure items. How many times have we seen an installment agreement? We get a letter saying installment agreement is granted, it's in place, Then we go check the records 30 days, 60 days later, and it's their IRS records show them not in any kind of agreement.
Or they
still subject to collect.
They miss a tax.
Wow.
So then
it just
defaults.
yes. Yeah. There's all these little housekeeping items that you need to sew it up and put it in a nice box. I can't tell how many clients come and say, I was in an installment. I got a levy. I've been paying under this installment. I called and did this installment agreement. I'm paying $500 a month for the last 2 years, and I just got a levy. How'd that happen? Well, you go look at their records, and one of the payments wasn't credited. They missed filing a tax return. They didn't know that they had to file their tax returns on time and pay or incur another liability. They still paying the $500 a month and didn't even know they were in default.
Wow.
So we see this all the time. So there's a lot of little housekeeping items that will prevent a complete closure of the case. And that's kind of what we're talking about, to make sure this thing is sewn up, put to bed, client goes on with their life, and the IRS gets its agreed to money and everybody walks away and the case is done.
Right. I mean, that's the goal at the end of the day, is that full case completion. That's how we round out this whole tax resolution process. And yeah, I mean, we mentioned the monitoring and becoming current and compliant on the front end of obviously submitting this resolution request, but it sounds to me like there's some monitoring going on after the fact to make sure that, hey, the solution that we reached continues to be the solution that we reached. So again, if anything, to draw from that, as a member of our audience or a potential client of the Bryson Law Firm, is the idea of just having, a team in your corner to watch your back, to help you through that process, because it's daunting. I mean, we've hit that nail on the head with this show. I mean, it can be daunting to, move through this process with the IRS, try and take the bull by the horns by yourself. Boy, does it help to have somebody in your corner. So guys, as we're bringing today's episode to a head here, any final thoughts regarding tax resolution? Anything else you want to leave our audience with? Maybe something to consider for themselves should they maybe find themselves in their own tax-related issue at the moment?
Do something.
Yeah.
We do it. We say it every time. I think my big takeaway from this would be that there's not a one size fits all solution really for anyone. Because everybody's got some moving parts and it's a distinct financial situation. Everybody's life is different, clearly. That for me, that's the big takeaway. I don't know about Cary, but
yeah, I'll go back to my soapbox and I've said this so many times, do something, but do not,
the right thing. Yeah.
But do not call those scammers, and do not do that. They'll take you, get you a reputable, lawyer, local tax lawyer that knows what he's doing, that's done this before, everybody knows. I mean, you Google them and you find out everything about everybody, check them out, make sure you're comfortable with it, because you're going to spend some time
and money
with these people. Sure. They're gonna become a part of your family. I mean, and if you don't want to be a part of that family, don't retain them, because you're gonna, if their attitude is that, because you're gonna spend some time with these people. These cases are usually not that quick as they should be, because of the IRS, really. But so I would say do something, get your ducks in a row, understand what you're doing, and move. Putting your head in the sand and continuing to not file or continue not knowing is not going to help, because penalties and interest are going to go. And, just so we talked about that interest, but then I'll remind people, interest is not abatable unless you can prove the IRS did something to increase the amount of the interest, which I've been doing this for 30 years and I've never been able to do that.
Twice,
it is impossible to do that. It has to be, it's rare that you're going to be able to show that. So your interest is going to continue. Now, penalties, they're abatable and they have to have reasons, and we could do that. But still, The IRS is not a great creditor. They're not, so let's
super creditor.
let's
Works
take
creditor.
care of this. Take care of it. Do something. It's time to fix it. They're all fixable problems. I have not had a problem that we couldn't fix.
I love that. Guys, thank you so much for taking some time out of your day. You got a business to run. You got a lot of clients to help work through their tax related issues, and we appreciate you being here on the show to kind of walk through what that resolution process looks like. And I'm looking forward to having you guys back, getting into another discussion here soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alrighty. And hey, look, we want to take one final moment, as always, and thank you guys, our audience, for jumping aboard and being with us here on the show today. If you liked what you saw, you liked what you heard, you took something away from today's conversation, do us a favor, hit that like button, subscribe to the show on the platform you're checking us out on, and then, of course, share this information with friends, family, business owners, anybody that you think would benefit from these types of conversations, because at the end of the day, we're bringing the same types of meetings that Cary and Angie are having with their clients on a regular basis. We're bringing them right here to this show, having those same conversations here. We've got some great episodes teed up for you guys in episodes to come. Would hate to have you miss out on any beneficial information. So for updates, as I mentioned at the beginning, if you're ever wondering when we're going to be coming on here live here on the Facebook page, you can always head over to the Facebook page for updates as to when we're going to be doing these live streams. So for Cary and Angie, I'm Ryan Ruff. We're going to go ahead and say so long today, but we appreciate you being with us on today's installment of Talkin Tax.